Hi and welcome to today's video. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel if you haven't already, because this will help me out in growing the channel and being able to produce more videos like this one. This episode will guide you through the issues of Uncanny X-Men published in 1982. Issue 162. Carol Danvers is being experimented on. The Brood have separated her from the rest of the X-Men because her DNA appears to be different from that of the mutants, as well as that of regular baseline humans. The X-Men have all been implanted with the Brood egg, which will result in the Brood's hatchling having absorbed all the powers and genetic material of their individual hosts. With Carol being so unique, they are subjecting her to evolutionary modifications to determine the ramifications of their findings. They seem to be able to alter her physical form at will, but they're fascinated by her psychic resistance. Even though she seems to be enduring the pain she's experiencing, she remains conscious and is aware of all that happens. Brood are impressed by her defiant resilience. One of the Brood gets sent on an errand, and as it leaves, we see Wolverine hiding in the shadows. It took him a day and a night to arrive in Sleazoid City, and he's picked up Carol's scent, which brought him to the lab. He remembers how she got carried off by Brood scientists, and is not sure which would be worse, to find her dead or alive. He follows the Brood and takes out the Illuminators. The Brood is surprised by this and asks what's going on and who's there. Wolverine introduces himself, pops his claws and fights the Brood, who puts up a good fight. Wolverine throws the Brood through a window, right in the middle of the rest of the Brood. One of them tells the others to slay him, and Wolverine says he was hoping they'd say that. Wolverine is a warrior, by birth, training and choice, the best there is. As one of the X-Men he is now a superhero, but before that he was a Canadian Secret Service agent and a commando. With him being a mutant with fast healing and very accurate senses, combined with the adamantium claws and skeleton which makes his bones nearly unbreakable, he's the perfect warrior. After having dealt with the Brood, he finds Carol, who tells him that there's a fire burning within her, so bright and beautiful. She asks Wolverine to help her, but he has no idea how to. He tells her she'll be alright, even though she's had a rough ride. He thinks to himself how that is a lie, because he knows she isn't alright at all. And she knows it too. She looks normal, but her scent has been changed. She's no longer human, and that scares them both. Carol grabs a gun, while telling Logan how it's strange that after all she's been through, she feels like she's bursting with energy and feels better than she's done in a long while. They make their way to whatever lies ahead of them. We then switch to the place where Xavier's mansion used to stand. It's being rebuilt and Lorna Dane, also known as Polaris, is present, as a transporter beam drops Corsair and Havoc, father and son, on Earth. Lorna asks her lover what the news is, and Alex responds by saying it's lousy. Alex tells her that the captured X-Men have been traded off to the Brood by Deathbird, who used them as a leverage to have the Brood help her in seizing the Shi'ar throne with their coup d'etat. He also tells her that the Brood took the X-Men to their homeworld, wherever that may be. They have no idea. Alex lashes out at some construction beams lying around with his blast. Corsair is alarmed and thinks they're under attack and summons his hand blasters by tapping the jewels on his costume. Alex apologizes and tells him it's his fault. Corsair tells his son it's alright and how they all need to blow off some steam. Moira McTaggart, who is also present, notices how Corsair is somewhat jumpy and asks him what his plans are. He responds by saying his other son has been kidnapped and that he intends on rescuing him. Either that or avenge him. Moira says that Alex will want to go along with him, but Corsair doesn't want him to. Apart from him not wanting to potentially lose another son, the mission will involve killing. Corsair is used to that, Alex is not. Corsair tells Moira that they will be on their way soon, but he wanted to say goodbye to both her and the Professor. She then tells him that Charles isn't around and that he's taking all this very hard. Not because his X-Men are in danger per se, but more so because for all of his power, he's unable to do anything for any of them. He lost the woman he loves, and in the X-Men, he also lost the family he loves. and that he feels very low now. That even the strongest person has a breaking point. Moira fears that this might be it. She wishes Corsair good luck as he beams back up to the ship. At that moment, Cyclops, Corsair's other son, is running for his life. He's being chased by the Brood hunters. He's confused on where he is, but he knows for certain that it isn't Earth. While he tries fighting them off, he wonders if the others are alright. At that moment, he gets hailed by Storm and the other X-Men on the shore. Apparently they're not X-Men at all, but Brood posing as X-Men. He gets greeted by the one posing as Colossus, and he says, "Welcome sister, we have been eagerly awaiting you." Cyclops flashes out with his eye-beam. As he does so, he sees his own reflection and he resembles a Brood as well. The Brood tell him he's been implanted with an egg, and how there's no power in the universe that can save him. He gets attacked by the other Brood, and they strip away his humanity, revealing the young queen nestling in his soul. She draws him in, and he doesn't resist. He's filled with despair as two big hands push the Brood aside. Cyclops sees his Professor X and asks him if he's gone insane. He asks for the professor to help him. Xavier tells him that he's given him all the help he needs from when he first trained Scott. Scott realizes the images are just that, threatening and seemingly real only if he allows them to be. He wakes up from what appears to be a dream, but he instantly seems to forget what he was dreaming about. He can tell from the amount of moons in the night sky that they're far away from home. He does remember that they were supposed to be on Lilandra's homeworld, but this place looks nothing like how Xavier described it to Scott. He finds Storm sitting in a trance. He approaches her but does not want to disturb her, because that might prove dangerous. He thinks back to how they were supposed to be honored for rescuing Lilandra, but he notices his clothes are torn apart, and how his nightmares indicate some kind of psychic conflict. He wonders if they're being manipulated. As he observes Storm, he notices some form of energy around Storm, in the form of one of the creatures from his nightmares. The creature seems to be smiling at Scott. A lightning bolt flashes in the sky, and the image Scott was seeing fades away. He wonders if this was Storm's doing, and if she's having a nightmare like he was having. He feels he needs to wake her up, and does so. She's crying as she wakes up. She was lost, no longer herself, and at war with herself, without knowing why. Scott tries to comfort her, but his words are fairly hollow. He thinks to himself how scared he is and how beaten he feels they are. That no matter what they do, there seems to be no hope. He tells Storm that they have to find the others, but has no idea where to go from there. At that moment, Carol and Logan arrive and Aurora notices Logan's skin. He tells her it's not a pretty story, but it can wait. What they need to do now is to get themselves off the planet. Logan fills Scott in on what he found out about the Brood City, the carcass it's built on, how big it is, and where Lilandra's vessel is located. If they can reach that, they can leave the planet. Soon they find the other X-Men and split up in two different squads. Colossus, Nightcrawler and Kitty are still under the influence of the Brood, and their perceptions are off from the reality they're in. Wolverine, Cyclops, Carol and Colossus make their way down the corridors of the hive. They follow Wolverine, who is on the trail of Lilandra's scent. Colossus feels like they're still in Lilandra's place, due to the influence of the Brood. Cyclops notices something is bothering Wolverine, but he won't talk about it. He figures it has something to do with the way Logan's skin looks. Carol notices the walls appear to be a result of a natural organic process, and not something that's been constructed. But to Colossus, they feel as normal walls. They feel like they're made out of metal to him. Wolverine is still trying to figure out the best way of dealing with his dilemma, namely dealing with his friends being implanted with Brood eggs. They come at a point where they can go either of two routes. One leads to where Lilandra is being held, the other leads them smack dab to the place where the Brood's great mother is hiding out. Wolverine wants to get in there and slay the Brood Queen, but Cyclops tells him to leave her be, because the objective is getting Lilandra out of there. As Wolverine and Cyclops argue about whether or not to kill during war, Carol warns them to postpone their discussion since they're getting attacked by a full contingent of Brood hunters. During the battle, Cyclops wonders why the Brood leader told them specifically to take the humans alive. Them holding back gives the X-Men a slight advantage. Carol breaks away from the fight as she tries to free Lilandra. Wolverine tells Cyclops to back him up because he's heading for the Queen's chamber. Cyclops tells Wolverine to stick with them and not go after the Queen. Wolverine doesn't listen and confronts the Queen. The Queen immediately senses the egg implant no longer being inside of Wolverine. He attacks the Queen and the Brood reinforcements arrive on the scene. Colossus' mind starts to clear up and he can see how the newly arrived enemies are not the same race as Lilandra is. Carol was successful in liberating Lilandra and they arrive as well. carrying blasters, and they shoot away at the Brood. Carol then suggests a tactical withdrawal to Cyclops, since they got what they came for. Lilandra has been liberated. Cyclops then tells the X-Men to retreat, but Wolverine is not having it. He wants to kill the Queen, end this war. They argue and Wolverine tells Cyclops to leave already. He's staying there. He says they're as good as dead anyways, thanks to the Queen, and all he cares about is killing her. Storm Squad is making progress towards the spacecraft of Lilandra. She's flying up in the air with Kurt and Kitty clinging on. She's trying to get the two as high up in the air as possible, the closest she can to the spacecraft, so that Kurt can teleport the last part. Kurt tells Kitty to hold her breath as he teleports the two next to the hull of Lilandra's vessel. Storm's being shot at by a Brood patrol craft as she lures them away from Kitty and Kurt. Kitty faces inside the ship, while Kurt stays on the outside, clinging on to the hull of the ship. He's somewhat confused, since teleporting himself and Kitty took a lot out of him, when he was just getting used to carrying others along with him. Kitty's job inside the ship is to open the airlock and let Kurt inside. She only has a couple of minutes to do so, because Kurt will either suffocate or freeze to death, being this high up in the planet's atmosphere. Kurt could not teleport inside, in fear of teleporting into something solid, so Kitty has to find her way on her own and help Kurt inside. She finds the airlock she was looking for, but she gets jumped by one of the Brood. He tells her to yield or suffer the consequences. This is Kitty's first encounter with the Brood as far as she is aware of, but Wolverine and Storm told her all about them. She's still impressed by the sight of one close-up though. The Brood tries to sting her with his venom, while he tells her that he's only trying to capture her alive, since he's been ordered to do so. The Brood tells Kitty she's trapped now, but apparently the Brood hadn't seen Kitty enter the hull using her phasing powers, or it would have known differently. Kitty then heads for the control panel. Using the knowledge of the Shi'ar technology she received from Professor X's infodump when she and Nightcrawler were taken as hostages by the Shi'ar. The airlock needs one door to be closed before the other one can be opened to let Nightcrawler in. Kitty hopes and prays that the first door will close and lock before the Sleazoid gets any closer. Her plan is to open the door while phasing, propelling the Brood into deep space due to the explosive decompression. But Kitty's moral compass concludes that that would be murder and she can't perform an act like that. The Brood tells her to get away from the controls, but Kitty tells the Brood to leave or she will kill them both. He calls her bluff and attacks her. His stingers phase right through her and he is surprised by this, yet he makes another attempt to correct his attack and tries to grab her once more. One of its tentacles accidentally slaps the control panel and the airlock opens up, ejecting him miles away from the spacecraft. As Kitty drags a lifeless and ice-cold Kurt inside, she's dealing with her feelings of guilt for most likely killing the Brood. She thinks about Wolverine probably complimenting her on her actions, but she doesn't want to become like him in that regard. The other X-Men and Carol and Lilandra are still fighting the Brood and the Queen. Cyclops once more tries to tell Wolverine to not kill the Queen, but Lilandra tells Cyclops that he's being a fool. This is a war against the deadliest of enemies, life and death. No room for chivalry and honor, just defeat or victory. Wolverine agrees, and just as he's about to stab his claws through the Queen's skull, they get transported out by a beam, and Lilandra's vessel ignites and lifts off. They are now off the planet. Not yet out of harm's way, still within the gravity field of this part of the universe sun, so they're still not able to shift into warp space. Thus still vulnerable. Cyclops and Lilandra discuss on the vessel's firepower, and their chance of escaping unnoticed, and their chance of survival as a whole. Wolverine is still angry at Scott for not helping him in going after the Brood and killing her immediately. Kitty asks why he's so angry and hates the Queen so much, and how she's glad he didn't kill her. Apparently she's still somewhat under the influence. As Wolverine looks at his fellow X-Men with a heavy heart, he's about to tell them why he's so angry and worried about his friends, what exactly the Brood Queen did to them all. But right as he's about to tell them, the vessel's being aimed at, and the command to open fire is given. Thanks for watching.